In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
Let's talk about the NBA draft. We bring in friend of the show, Chris Dortch from Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook, SEC Network, and NBA.com. Hey, Chris, Vincent, Brendan, we're a little bit short on time. We apologize, but we want to get your thoughts on some draft stuff. How you doing this morning, Chris?
I'm doing great, guys.
Hey, well, real quick, top of the draft, Nerlens Noel seems to be there in mock drafts. Are you convinced that he will be the number one pick to the Cleveland Cavaliers? And then if so, who might go right after him at 2 and 3 in your opinion?
You know, I'm not convinced. Everybody seems to think so, and maybe the word is even that he will recover from his ACL surgery in time to start the season. If so, that's great. I think Ben McLemore, guys, is a player that it might be something like passing on Michael Jordan for Sam Bowie one day. If the kid ever gets a fire lit under him, I think I wouldn't call him a passive kid, but he's a good-natured kid. If he could ever get a little fire under him, with his scoring skills, I think he will one day maybe be seen as the best player in this draft.
Well, that's a good lead, and Chris, in terms of when I look at it, my top 3 players that I'll say, not in draft order or anything like that, but 5 years from now, the 3 best players that I think to come out of this draft are McLemore, Victor Oladipo, and C.J. McCollum. Give me your top 3.
Wow, that's pretty good. I did a story on C.J. McCollum, and I agree. I think he's a lottery pick. He could well be that kind of guy that blossoms like that. I like McLemore, I think. I like Oladipo like you do. And I think Anthony Bennett has got a chance to be an all-star. The kid from UNLV, he's kind of a little undersized of a power forward, but he's got a face-up game. He can make threes. I think the trend in the NBA is a little bit going to a positionless league, if you will, and guys that are a little undersized can rebound. So I think Anthony Bennett might be one of those guys who ends up being an all-star.
And I'm going to throw a couple names at you, guys who, 3 SEC players and one guy from Memphis who have all left early, and I want your thoughts on their decision-making process and where you see them landing. B.J. Young and Marshawn Powell from Arkansas, Phil Pressey from Missouri, and Adonis Thomas from Memphis.
Marshawn Powell probably won't get drafted. B.J. Young is a mid-second rounder, I think. He's not a great jump shooter, and I think that's going to hurt him because he's not really big either. He's a good finisher. I think Pressey, point guards are commodity in any league, even the NBA, and he's a creative and gifted passer. But he's going to have to learn. Brendan, you were there in Knoxville when he took that horrendous 3, and we can't say what his coach said on the sidelines, but anybody that can read lips, even moderately, could tell what he said, and that led to Tennessee coming back and winning. And he had all kinds of bad decisions like that, so he's going to have to stop thinking he's a scorer, realize he's a setup man, not try to make every fantastic pass there is.
And what about Adonis Thomas, left Memphis? I'm seeing him as a late second rounder. Do you think he makes it in that day?
I think he might barely make it in. If you look at some of the mock drafts, he's there. One mock draft I'm looking at right now has him as the very last pick, and that's owned by Memphis. I think he could have been better served staying another year. He didn't have a great sophomore year, and I don't think people thought that he would come out. He didn't shoot the ball nearly as well as he's capable, and he's going to have to do well, I think, in workouts to boost his stock.
Tell the listeners, Chris, about a guy I think one of the more interesting names in the draft, in Nate Walters from South Dakota State. He has signed locally with sports agency, Allegiant Athletic Agency A3, which has its office right there in Market Square. So he signed locally, but he's out of South Dakota State. Scorer, but maybe not. If you look at him, you expect him to be a jump shooter, but he can do a lot more.
Yeah, I did a story about him for NBA.com too, and it was the most shared and retweeted thing I've written all year. People are intrigued by him. He's a legit 6'4". He can make jump shots. He's not a classic jump shooter. Even he will admit that because his release point is pretty low. But here's what he does. He's as good a ball handler as there is in the draft. He can take that thing on a string like a yo-yo, and his coaches tell me that that's what allows him to get his separation from no matter who he's playing. And if you look at what he's done against some of the better teams on their schedule, whenever they've played a power conference team, that guy has stepped up. So I think he's pushing his way into the first round, and I think he will be seen as a bargain, as a low first rounder in years to come.
You talk about bargain. I think right now my steal of the draft is going to end up being Ricky Lato from Providence. Just a kind of guy that not a lot of people know about. He'll probably be a second-round pick. Who's your steal of the draft?
You know, it's funny you mentioned him, Brendan, because I spoke to his agent today, and I'm doing a story about him for NBA.com this week. And I think you're right. He's certainly a guy that could be seen that. Another guy I like is Jackie Carmichael, the kid from Illinois State. He's got legit size at 6'9", 250. He can really move and has great hands, and he's got a nose for rebounding the basketball. So he's a bigger Kenneth Faried, if you will. So I think if he falls to the second round, which everybody's predicting he will, I think in time he'll be seen as a steal too.
NBA Draft, June 27th. Chris Dortch has it covered for you. NBA.com also contributes to the SEC Network. And, of course, pick up Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook as well. Chris, sorry we didn't have more time with you, but let's get you on again real soon, and we'll talk more draft with you. We appreciate you.